With daylight, men rose from the hay and crouched on their haunches and regarded the new arrivals without curiosity. They were half naked, and they sucked their teeth and snuffled and stirred and picked at themselves like apes. A cherry light had washed a high small window frowned dark, and an early street vendor begun to cry his wares. Their morning feed was bowls of cold pinole, and they were fitted with chains and routed out Tinto, the streets clanking and stinking, overseen all day by a gold-toothed pervert who carried a plated rawhide quart and harried them down the gutters, on their knees, gathering up the filth, under the wheels of vending carts, the legs of beggars, dragging behind them their sacks, off refuse. In the afternoon, they sat in the shade of a wall and ate their dinner and watched two dogs hung together in the street sidle and step. "How do you like city life?" said Toadvine. "I don't like it worth a damn so far. I keep waiting for it to take with me, but it ain't done it." They watched the overseer covertly as he passed, his hands clasped behind his back, his cap cocked over one eye. The kid spat. "I seen him first," said Toadvine. "Seen who first?" "You know who. Old brass teeth yonder." The kid looked after the sauntering figure. "My biggest worry is that something will happen to him. I pray daily for the Lord to watch over him." "How? You think you going to get out of this jackpot that you're in?" "We'll get out. It ain't like the carcel." "What's the carcel?" "State penitentiary. There's old pilgrims in there, come down the trail back in the 20s. The kid watched the dogs. After a while, the guard came back along the wall, kicking the feet of any who were sleeping. The younger guard carried his escopeta at the ready, as if there might be some fabled upper sing among these chained and tattered felons. "Vamanos, vamanos," he called. The prisoners rose and shuffled out into the sun. A small bell was ringing, and a coach was coming up the street. They stood along the curb and took off their hats. The guidon passed, ringing the bell, and then the coach. It had an eye painted on the side and for mules to draw it, taking the host to some soul. A fat priest tottered after carrying an image. The guards were going among the prisoners, snatching the hats from the heads of the newcomers and pressing them into their infidel hands. When the coach had passed, they donned their hats again and moved on. The dogs stood tail to tail. Two other dogs sat a little apart, squatting loosely in their skins. Just frames of dogs in Annapolis hides, watching the coupled dogs, and then watching the prisoners clanking away up the street, all lightly shimmering in the heat. These life-like wonders much reduced, rough likenesses thrown up at hearsay, after the things themselves had faded in men's minds. He'd taken up a pallet between Toadvine and another Kentuckian, a veteran of the war. This man had returned to claim some dark-eyed love he'd left behind 2 years before when Donovan's command pulled east for Saltillo, and the officers had had to drive back hundreds of young girls dressed as boys that took the road behind the army. Now he would stand in the street solitary in his chains and strangely unassuming, gazing out across the tops of the heads off the townspeople, and at night he'd tell them of his years in the West, an amiable warrior, a reticent man. He'd been at Mir, where they fought until the drain tiles and the gutters and thespouts from the azoteas ran with blood by the gallon, and he told them how the brittle old Spanish bells would explode when hit, and how he sat against a wall with his shattered legs stretched out on the cobbles before him, listening to a lull in the firing that grew into a strangest lance. And in this silence, there grew a low rumbling that he took for thunder, until a cannonball came around the corner, trundling over the stones like a wayward bowl, and went past and down street, and disappeared from sight. He told how they'd taken the city of Chihuahua, an army of irregulars that fought in rags and underwear, and how the cannonballs were solid copper and came loping through the grass like runaway sons, and even the horses learned to sidestep them, and how the dames of the city rode up into the hills in buggies and picnicked and watched the battle, and how at night, as they sat by the fires, they could hear the moans of feeding out on the plain and see by its lantern the dead cart moving among them like a hearse from limbo. They had gravel enough, said the veteran, but they didn't know how to fight. They'd stick. You heard stories about how they found M chained to the trail spades of their pieces, libertines and all, but if they was, I never seen it. We picked powder, and the locks yonder blowed them gates open. People in here looked like skinned rats. Whitest Mexicans you'll ever see. Found theirselves down and commenced kissing our feet and such. Old Bill, he just turned M all loose. Hell, he didn't know what they'd done. Just told M not to steal nothing. Of course they stole everything they could get their hands on. Whipped 2 of M, and they both died of it. And thievery next day, another bunch run off with some mules, and Bill just flat out hung them fools. Which they did likewise perish of. But I never reckoned I'd be in here my own self. They were squatting, cross-legged by candlelight, eating from clay bowls with their fingers. Beckett looked up. He poked at the bowl. "What is this?" he said. "That's prime bull meat, son, from the corrida. You'll get it of a Sunday night. You best keep chewing. Don't let it feel to weaken." He chewed. He chewed, and he told them of the encounter with the Comanche, and they chewed and listened and nodded. "I'm proud I missed that dance," said the veteran. "Them is some cruel sons of bitches. I know Ophone, old boy up on the Llano, near the Dutch settlements. They caught him, took his horse, and all dot left him to walk it. He come crawling into Fredericksburg on his hands and knees, buck-naked about 6 days later, and you know what they'd done? Cut the bottoms of his feet off." Toadvine shook his head. He gestured toward the veteran. "Granny Rat here knows M," he told Kid. "Fought M, ain't the granny." The veteran waved his hand. "Shot some stealing horses is all. Down toward Saltillo, wasn't a thing to it. There was a cave down there, had been a Lapon burial. Must have been 1,000 Indians in there, all settin' around. Had on their best robes and blankets and all. Had their bows and their knives, whatever, beads. The Mexicans carried everything off. Stripped him naked, took it all. They carried off whole. Indians to their homes and set M in the corner, all dressed up bait. They begun to come apart when they got out of that cave there, and they had to be thawed out. Towards the last of it, there was some Americans went in there and scalped what was left of them and tried to sell the scalps in Durango. I don't know if they had any luck about it or not. I expect some of them Injuns had been dead 100 years. Toadvine was toweling up grease from his bowl with a folded tortilla. He squinted at the kid in the candlelight. "What do you reckon we could get for old Brastiff's teeth?" he said. They saw patched Argonauts from the States driving mules through the streets on their way south through the mountains to the coast. Gold seekers itinerant, degenerates bleeding westward like some heliotropic plague. They nodded or spoke to the prisoners and dropped tobacco and coins in the street beside them. They saw black-eyed young girls with painted faces smoking little cigars, going arm in arm, handing them brazenly. They saw the governor himself erect and formal within his silk-mullion and sulky, clatter forth from the double doors of the palace courtyard, and they saw one day a pack of vicious-looking humans, mounted on unshod Indian ponies, riding half-drunk through the streets, bearded, barbarous, clad in the skins of animals stitched up with thews and armed with weapons of every description, revolvers of enormous weight, and bowick knives the size of claymores, and short two-barreled rifles with bores. You could stick your thumbs in and fed trappings of their horses, fashioned out of human skin, and their bridles woven up from human hair, and decorated with human teeth, and the riders, wearing scapulars, or necklaces of dried amblicand, human ears, and the horses raw looking and wild in the eye, and their teeth bared like furrowed dogs in riding. Also in the company a number of half-naked savages, reeling in the saddle, dangerous, filthy, brutal, the whole like a visitation from some heathen land, where they, and others like them, fed on human flesh. Foremost among them, outsized and childlike with his naked face, rode the judge. His cheeks were ruddy, and he was smiling and bowing to the ladies, and doffing his filthy hat. Thinner-moused dome of his head when he bared it was blinding white, and perfectly circumscribed a bow, so that it looked to have been painted. He and the reeking horde of rabble with hempest, on through the stunned streets, and hove up before the governor's palace, where their leader, a small black-haired man, clapped for entrance by kicking at the oaken doors with his boot. The doors were opened forthwith, and they rode in all, and the doors were closed again. "Gentlemens," said Toadvine, "I'll guarant goddamn thee I know what that there is about."